Senator, pleasure to meet you, and I thank you for coming, taking the time out of your busy schedule to come onto the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Doctor. I appreciate it.
You know, your background as a senator, as a district magistrate, as a veteran, really kind of integrates very well into this show because we talk about all those things.
Okay.
So I'm gonna put you on the spot on a lot of those topics today.
Sounds good.
We're kind of focusing today on animal issues,
Okay.
on drug issues, and mental health issues. And I know you're involved in all of those.
All three are in my wheelhouse legislatively, so that's great.
Yes. So what I want to do is ask you a couple questions. You're a veteran, so you were in
Yes.
what branch of the service?
I was in the U.S. Navy, and I was a JAG. So I was a lawyer in the Navy, and I was a prosecutor in Iraq. I actually prosecuted terrorists in the Iraqi court system, and then I was a defense attorney as well for Navy SEALs, sailors, Marines, Coast Guardsmen. And I did that from 2012 to 2007 to 2012.
And then you returned back to the States.
Yes.
And you entered into private practice in a law firm?
Yes, I was in private practice for a year at a multi-state law firm that was based in Mount Lebanon. It still is. And I ran for district judge. And I became a magisterial district judge, ran in 2013, and was a district judge until 2015 when I became a state senator.
And you're actually a state senator for Peters Township, Upper St. Clair.
I represent the 37th district, so I describe it as a big C around the city of Pittsburgh. Goes all the way north to Sewickley and Ohio Township, the airport corridor, and then the entire South Hills. So Peters Township, Mount Lebanon, Upper St. Clair, Jefferson Hills, Pleasant Hills, the entire swath of the South Hills.
It's amazing how they do that, but it's a big area.
It is a big area. It's a phenomenal district, and the district really cares about education funding. They care about it's a homogeneous district, which makes it fun to represent.
It's a diverse group of people.
A diverse group of people, but we have some of the best schools in the state.
We do.
We have an international airport.
Peters Township, for one.
Peters Township always ranked highly. We have an international airport. We have a military base in the 911th Air Wing. And we have some big business that's in the district too. Covestro comes to mind, which is right in Moon. Yes. So it is diverse in that sense, but it's just a pleasure to represent this district.
And now you're running for the same district as Congressman.
No, so I'm running in the 14th congressional
district. Oh, that's
district.
right. There was that change.
Right. So there was a change. So there's a redistricting. So I'm running for Congress, and that seat is Washington County, Greene County, Fayette, and half of Westmoreland. So there's about 780,000 constituents in that district. The state Senate district has about 270,000 constituents.
That's a big change there.
It is. It's a big change for sure.
And a big challenge, I'm sure.
It is, but I'm up for it.
Yes. So let's talk about some of the bills that you've brought forward. And one of them that's key interest to me in this show is pet abuse, animal abuse. Tell us about that, if you would.
Well, I have a few bills that focus on animal abuse, but a lot of people say, why are you so focused on animal welfare and prevention of cruelty to animals? Well, I think if someone's going to abuse an animal, the next step is a person, right? So whatever we can do to combat those who abuse animals, we have to do it. So for example, last year we passed Libre's Law, which was a bill that increased the penalty for someone who abused an animal. Now, when I was a district judge, the max fine was $300 for cruelty and neglect to an animal. That was totally inadequate for a lot of these crimes. So Libre's Law allows a district judge, and really the court system, any judge in the court system, to assess a higher fine, and also in extreme situations prosecutors can charge a felony offense for cruelty and neglect.
So what is a felony offense, and what does that actually mean to the perpetrator?
Right, so the penalties go up, so a lot more jail time with a felony, and also with a misdemeanor. With a summary offense is how these cases were handled before. It was 90 days maximum jail time and a $300 fine. Totally inadequate. So with Libre's Law, we now have the full scale. We can prosecutors can charge a misdemeanor, a summary offense again, or they can charge a felony.
Over the 25 years that I've been pretty heavily involved with animals, it's amazing the neglect and abuse that you see.
It is. It's horrifying.
And it shocks me that somebody can do this to a defenseless little animal, first of all, but look what they do to people.
Right.
And you're right, I think it leads. If you can do that to an animal, you just migrate up to a person with no problem.
Right.
But I personally don't understand how somebody can do that, but how we can neglect the fact that somebody has done that, and these penalties haven't been severe enough, and people get away with it and they repeat it.
Exactly.
And one of the problems is puppy mills, and I know you have a bill that was written for that.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. I have a bill that will in effect ban puppy mills. So what the bill does is it says that a retailer that is selling dogs, cats, or rabbits, the retailer has to source those animals from shelters. And that's going to have two effects. One is it's going to help move animals from the shelters and get them into homes. Very important, because we have a lot of dogs and cats and rabbits in shelters. Rabbits especially after Easter.
Absolutely.
Okay, so they're part of this too. But the second part of this bill is it's going to kill the market for puppy mills. Because at this point, the puppy mill breeders, and these are horrific conditions, just horrible conditions, there won't be a market to sell those dogs.
And what's amazing that maybe our audience doesn't know is Pennsylvania, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana are key states for puppy mills.
We are, and that's sad. We should not be proud of that. Pennsylvania is a leader in the puppy mill industry, and I aim to end that and take the fight to this horrific practice of breeding the dogs in this manner.
Well, you'll certainly get my support over the many years that I've had, I don't know, 15 rescue dogs maybe, somewhere in that. I can't even keep track.
That's incredible.
Anymore.
That's incredible.
And some of them have come from puppy mills, and they were the most neglected and in the worst shape and condition of any of the dogs that you see out there.
Right.
And the problem that part with this puppy mill stuff is they open up in a secluded area, they operate for a while until they get caught or found out, and then they close up shop and relocate somewhere.
Right.
So there's a bill that you're putting forward for the state of Pennsylvania will totally make it illegal to even open up or operate a puppy mill.
No, so it won't make it illegal to operate a puppy mill. I'd like to have a bill that does that. What this bill does is it kills the market for those puppy mills. So the puppy mills will not be able to sell to the retail stores. It'll also be, they also will not be able to sell outdoors. So on the side of the road, which we see in some places, particularly tourist areas, they won't be able to sell at flea markets or other outdoor markets. And the pet stores will have to source the animals from the shelters.
The burden's on the pet store.
The burden's on the pet store.
Okay.
And pet stores actually don't make too much of their profit off the actual sale of the dog. They really make their profit on what comes with the dog, so the collar, the bowls, the toys. Right. So some pet stores have already voluntarily started to adopt this practice. I just want to codify it and make sure it's a law that the pet stores have to source from shelters.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't read that bill. I heard a little bit about it, and hopefully that passed. What's it take to pass that bill?
So, well, right now I'm getting co-sponsors. I had a whole bunch of rescue dogs from puppy mills in my office 2 weeks ago. All the senators came by and we were playing with the puppies, and I really put the sell on them to co-sponsor my bill. So I got a lot of co-sponsors that day. And then the bill will go into a committee. It has not been assigned to a committee yet. I have optimism that we'll be able to get out of a committee and then go to the floor of the Senate. And it'll be and the Senate's been very good on animal welfare bills. Libre's law passed without a problem. There was a bill that was passed, I believe, before I came into the Senate on horses, increasing the penalties for those who abuse horses. It's called Cornelia's law. So we have a track record of being pretty aggressive on these bills and standing up for animals in the Senate.
Yeah, well, I hope it succeeds. What do you expect the time span for that?
I'd like it to pass during the budget season, but it all depends on how much the budget takes up our attention. But this is a bill that we could maybe get through in June. And if not, when we come back in the fall, I'd like to take it up.
Awesome. So we have some hope.
We do. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my cross-reporting bill. So just like we were talking about people who abuse animals, there's an 80% correlation by the people that abuse animals and people who abuse children. But it's tough to undercover child abuse for a lot of reasons. One, children are a lot of times nonverbal. They wear clothes. You can cover up bruises with makeup. what my bill does, it says that if you're a CYS officer, a child and youth service officer, and you don't see any indication of child abuse, but you see animal abuse, which is very hard to cover up, right? Very hard to hide an emaciated dog, a mistreated cat, for example. That's glaring.
Right.
So if the officer sees that, then the officer has to report that misconduct to an animal control officer, and then vice versa. So if the animal control officer is in the house, does not see any indication of animal abuse, but sees child abuse, then that officer has to report the child abuse. This will give law enforcement a second bite of the apple, and I think it will lead to more prosecutions and more convictions of the people who abuse children and animals.
So these bills are presented to the House at the same time?
Well, first off, they have to get passed in the Senate.
Yeah.
And then they'll go to the House. The cross-reporting bill is currently in the Judiciary Committee, which I sit on. So I'm advocating that that bill is run.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thanks, Doctor. I appreciate it.
So we'll have to invite you back to keep us abreast on how that is proceeding in the system and whether it passes or not. I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks.
You are going to be on my radio show, Healthy Pets, Healthy People, this
Yes.
Saturday. So that's at 9 o'clock. And it'll give the audience a opportunity to call in and ask you questions.
Great.
But that's on AM 1250. But you also are very involved with opioid addiction.
I am.
And you're working on bills and legislation as well with that. Could you tell us about that?
Right. Well, when it comes to opioid addiction, I really focus on what I perceive as the underlying issue, and I think that is we as a society need to have a paradigm shift on mental health. I think that right now there's a stigma on mental health, and people are reluctant to get care and treatment for mental health issues. So I think that there's a lot of things we can do to get people help. Now, when I was a district judge, for instance, if somebody was before me and they had a substance abuse issue, or if they had an issue with truancy, not coming to school, I'd always want to make sure that that person was screened for mental health. Because a lot of times the root cause of the problem is an undiagnosed or untreated mental health issue. Mm-hmm. And then the defendant a lot of times is either self-medicating or reacting negatively toward that. So that's one thing that we need to do in the criminal justice system. If somebody does have a mental health issue or substance abuse issue, then we should get that person a bed in a facility and not a cot in a jail cell. So that's one area that I'm really bullish on and advocating for. Also, I'm advocating a mental health screening bill for 6th grade and 11th grade students. I have a phenomenal partner in that, Dan Miller, who's a state representative in Mount Lebanon. So he and I have partnered. He's got the House bill, I have the Senate bill. But what we'll do is when students come into 6th grade and 11th grade, there'll be a screening for depression. And if the student has depression, then we'll be able to get treatment for that depression. And hopefully that student will then learn of ways to cope with a mental health issue before that student turns to underage drinking and then drugs, and that eventually leads to opioid addiction.
So can you define that screening process a little more for us?
So right now the Navy does a good job in doing it. The military does this. So when you go into a physical, the practitioner or the healthcare provider will ask a series of questions. How are you feeling today? Have you had suicidal thoughts? And there's a litany of questions that are prepared for the healthcare professional to ask. If the student or the patient in this case then pops for a positive that he or she may have a mental health issue, particularly depression, then that triggers a referral to a psychologist. So I'd like to see this in our schools. I think that a lot of students have undiagnosed mental issues, and why not get that student treatment? If we're screening them for physical issues, why are we not doing the same thing for mental issues as well?
So why did you target that age group?
Well, it was I'll be honest with you, it's part of a negotiation. I think that we need to have screening. I'd go as young as probably 5th grade through 12th grade, and I would do screening for all mental health issues. I'd have a more expansive list of questions, but I'm pragmatic. That's my style. And I know that we have to negotiate and start somewhere. So the negotiation led to 6th grade and 11th grade and for depression only. Once this bill is passed, I will then work to expand this bill and have screening for all grade levels. Like I said, ideally 5th grade to 12th grade, and expand from depression to other issues.
I'm not aware of this process, but could you explain to our audience what it takes to write a bill, and then move it along the line.
Right. Doctor, it's extremely tedious, but I love it. And but what you do is you have an idea or someone presents an idea to you. You then write what's called a co-sponsorship memo, and it says, so for this instance, I want to have legislation to do mental health screening for high school students, high school and middle school students. That memo is then circulated, and any other senator that's interested joins as a co-sponsor, or sometimes a co-prime sponsor, meaning they have authorship too, okay? That then, you then have a list of sponsors and co-sponsors, co-prime sponsors, what have you. That then, the bill then gets drafted, okay, at the Legislative Bureau. Legislative Bureau.
And that's all the legal language, the draft.
Right, you have attorneys that draft the bill. Now, look, I'm a lawyer, I like this, so I'm a little bit more involved than your average senator, just because because I'm a lawyer, I like this. But once the bill is drafted, then the bill goes to the President Pro Tem of the Senate. He then assigns it to a committee. So a lot of, this bill would probably go to the Education Committee, okay? And then once it goes to a committee, the committee chair has to run it. That bill has to pass in the committee.
So they investigate all of the details and the fine tuning of the bill in that committee. Is that what their job is?
Yes. So the committee are the subject area experts. So you have senators that focus on, in this case, education issues. I'm not on the Education Committee, but those senators really invest a lot of time into that. I'm on the Judiciary Committee as well as some others, but it makes sense because I'm a lawyer, right? I'm a former district judge, former prosecutor. So a lot of times the people have special expertise, and that's why they're put on the committees. But once it's in the committee, other senators can amend the bill, they can critique the bill, and they don't have to run the bill. The bill may never get out of committee. Most bills never get out of committee.
And what does that mean, actually? They don't get put on to be voted on?
Or they get no voted in the committee, okay. Right. Very few bills actually make it onto the floor, and that's the floor of the Senate. But let's say a bill does make it out of committee. Once it's on committee, then you have 10 days to consider the bill. And the bill has to be considered on 3 different occasions. So first consideration, the bill is read. And that way everybody can take a look at the bill. And if they have amendments or questions, they can deal with it. The second day, the bill is under second consideration where you can amend the bill. So if you have amendments, you can offer those. And then those are voted on by an up or down vote. Okay. Then the third day, you can also offer amendments at that point, but that is usually the vote. And during that process, a bill can be tabled, meaning that's taken off the calendar, and then you have to make a motion to bring it back on the calendar.
So that doesn't mean it died or it's never going to be looked at again. That means it's just going to sit idle for a while. Exactly,
which happens a lot. So if a bill isn't voted on within 10 days, it's automatically tabled. But on that third day, usually there's an up or down vote. And if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, then that's the end. And you could always reintroduce it. But the vast majority of bills never run, never make it out of committee, and never make it out of the Senate. Rarely does a bill move. But the system of government is set up that way. We need to be a slow, deliberative body to pass laws that have been thoroughly vetted and that are necessary, right? So I don't view that as a bad thing. I mean, there's literally thousands of bills that are entered, but we need to prioritize, put our political capital where it needs to be, and make sure that only the necessary bills and best bills are passed.
So a bill like animal abuse bill or mental health bill aren't really partisan type bills because those are affecting people on, say, both sides of the aisle, as they say.
Right.
And are they generally easier bills to be passed?
Yeah, so actually a lot of the animal welfare bills are can be rather controversial. The Farm Bureau, understandably so, sometimes has issues with it because where do we draw the line do we draw the line at dogs and cats? Does this go to livestock, right? So there's a slippery slope argument that they have. So it's not always as cut as dry as you would think.
And I think that's in part because history has trained us to look at dogs and cats, our pets, as livestock.
So I know that some people think of dogs and cats as livestock. I would take a much different view. We as humankind have engineered dogs and cats to be our companions. And if you think about it, there's a survival mechanism that we have with dogs and cats. Yes. So for instance, I would say that we as humans would not have thrived as a species if we had not co-opted the dog. And arguably, the dog would not have thrived as much as the dog has without us. They are truly our best friends.
I agree 100% with you.
And we evolved with the dog in a lot of ways. Our hearing is not as good as a dog's. Our sense of smell isn't as good as a dog's. So the dogs used to help us hunt when we needed them to hunt for food. We as a species would not have been successful if it were not for our dogs. Cats, there's evidence that cats would come around our campsites, clear out rats and mice that spread disease, right? So there's even a evolutionary reason why we have cats. These animals deserve just like dogs as well. I'm sorry, horses as well. These animals deserve special protection because they have been bred to interact with us, to love us, and to be our companions. And that means they deserve special protection under our law.
68% of the people in the United States have pets.
Yes.
Dogs and cats. And I'm specifically speaking about dogs and cats.
Right.
68%. Most of those people, I'm not going to say all of them, because there are the idiots out there that abuse some of those animals, right? Think of those dogs and those cats as family members. Yet the law doesn't allow us to do that.
Right. We have to update the law. And again, I don't think, if you look at the evolutionary aspect of why we have dogs and cats, it's not a stretch to think that we look at them as family members, right? Again, we owe so much to the dog in particular. And looking at dogs and cats as just merely property has to change. We have to say that they do have, I don't want to say they have legal standing because that brings on a whole other issue, but we have to say they deserve special consideration under our law. And if somebody is abusing a dog or a cat or a horse or any animal really, I'm not a psychologist, but I believe that's indicative of sociopathic behavior and tendencies. And if one can abuse a dog, a helpless animal, right, who again was bred to love us, if that person can abuse that dog, then there's nothing stopping that person from abusing a child or an elderly person, right, or any other human. It's really indicative of sociopathic behavior, and that's why we need to target those who abuse these animals and stop them before they move on to humans. I
will tell you, as long as I have a voice, you will have my support.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Doctor.
That is so important as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
You know, it's interesting to learn how this legislation works because as non-political people and not involved in politics or in government, we don't really know how the system works.
Right.
I mean, we get a little education on it, but we soon forget it.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting to hear you talk about the procession of how laws get passed and what's involved in all that and the work that goes into that.
Thanks.
So interesting. So this mental health program, actually, we're doing now a lot of work, Healthy Pets, Healthy People, and so forth, the show with service dogs, and for veterans, in fact. And the servicemen who have PSTD are getting emotional support from these service dogs.
Right.
And that shows that integration that you're talking about, how
Right.
important these animals are to people.
Right.
As a veteran yourself, and you saw the stresses you went through in doing what you were doing, and how people come back and they're so devastated. It is so important to have that protection for these animals. And there is a differentiation between service dogs and pets.
Yes.
But there's becoming resistance to that. And I don't know if you're following the airlines, for example. Delta, I think United as well, have made it very difficult for people with service animals to get their animals on board the plane.
Right.
And maybe we can start looking at some legislation of that to bar that. That's more of a federal
Right.
level, I know.
Right.
But it starts somewhere.
You're absolutely correct. It does.
And then all these things that are going on the airlines where people that are unaware or I don't even know what's causing it, where the dogs are dying in flight. Right. Like that one big case that happened where they put the dog in an overhead and it suffocated.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that case, but.
Oh yeah, they I forget what airline it was, or I don't even want to mention it, but they insisted that the dog that should have been underneath the seat in the carrier be put in the overhead, and the dog suffocated.
That's sad.
And the flight attendant ordered that and wouldn't let the dog out underneath the seat, and so they arrived home with a dog that died in flight. And there were a lot of cases of animal neglect on the part of the airlines.
Right.
You know, so there's a lot of things to look at. So this opioid addiction, and you referred to the mental health addiction, so problem that we have. Expand the mental health into what you're doing now with opioid addiction.
Well, I think so. We've made a lot of strides in the Senate and in the General Assembly on the opioid crisis. I do think that at the root cause of this is the mental health issue that's being overlooked in the United States. But some of the things we've done to combat it is, one, medical marijuana. I think that medical marijuana will give physicians and other practitioners another tool to treat pain. And if we have another avenue to treat pain with medical marijuana, which is not physically addictive, like an opioid, then I think that will reduce the amount of heroin addicts and the amount of those who are abusing opioids, because the patient will never get hooked on the first place, right? They're not going to get hooked on marijuana. Again, it's physically not addictive. So that's one thing we've done. We've also put a limit on how many opioids can be prescribed at a given time. One of the problems we have with opioids is they're prescribed to such an extent that there's a lot of times a leftover amount. And students have what are called pill parties. And I had this when I was a district judge. They'd raid their grandparents' homes or their parents' medicine cabinets, put all the pills in a bowl, and then just take the pills, right? We shouldn't have that many opioids on the market. And we will also cut down how many opioids are on the black market by reducing the number that can be prescribed at a given time.
So you're looking for the practitioner to police that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think that's important. I think the bigger issue, though, is the drug companies that are the manufacturers of these drugs, you know, and their way of marketing. They market to the consumer. They push the drugs on the practitioners. Right. You know, that probably should even be expanded even more to look into how they operate their system. Right. You know?
There's a lot. One thing didn't get us into this mess. One thing's not going to get us out. There's no silver bullet. We really need to have a paradigm shift with the way we handle healthcare and mental health, and frankly, how we handle cases in the judiciary to solve this problem. And we also need education of youth. We need to make sure that
education is key, Senator.
Exactly.
I agree. Senator, that was a quick half-an-hour show.
It was.
I thank you so much for coming on. Senator Guy Reschenthaler, thank you so much, running for Congress in the 14th District.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. Remember, a healthy pet is a happy pet, and when you're healthy, you're happy too. Bye-bye.